box office struggle, Dune Part 2 has kind of lost technically. Kung Fu Panda 4 has emerged as the number one winner. However, Dune Part 2 still held up very respectably. It didn't lose a huge amount of the audience, and it already opened up fairly large. So it may not be a major hit, but it should eke out a respectable profit for Legendary. And they deserve it because they really have put up quite an investment and they were really patient despite the WB not being very wise with Dune Part 1, which I supported in theaters, so I'm proud of myself, but it didn't do as well as I think people hoped because they put it on HBO Max and really undermined the box office there. And again, Kung Fu Panda 4, although I'm not excited for it, I am glad that Jack Black is being very, very energetic. He put out this funny parody of Baby One More Time, which I reviewed on Examining Kubrick. Please check that out. So I do feel good that Jack Black at least is enthusiastic about this project, although from the reviews it is getting underwhelming numbers, I'd say. A lot of people are disappointed it's not better than it should be, but critics could be wrong. They are often wrong. Critics with Dune Part 2 are much more enthusiastic, but again, I'm a little less enthusiastic there, fairly more critical of Dune Part 2. Although I do think for fans of serious science fiction, yes, this is a big cause to celebrate that. It shows that it doesn't all have to be DCU or MCU films. There is now at least a bit of a breathing room for other kinds of film projects and things that are a little bit more creative. Yes, they're technically based on old IPs, but they are definitely trying to take an innovative approach to, quote, science fiction and fantasy fiction. And again, to be totally accurate, Imaginary, which I think is a horrifically bad film, also did fairly respectable due to its budget, which is only 10 million. So at least this weekend it did fairly well, but I'll be very curious if it has any fans going forward because it was probably one of the worst things I've ever seen. So hopefully the box office will decline on that one. Although Blumhouse has churned out a few really great projects here and there. More lately, it's just been one disappointing film after another. And also, this was exclusive to theaters, and they put out some fairly good things on streaming. But this, they picked this to be a theatrical release. So, although I have my criticisms of Dune Part 2, if I had to pick between Dune Part 2 and Imaginary, I would pick Dune Part 2 any day of the week, any time, any part of the multiverse. Dune Part 2, at least, is a very solid effort. I think it was misguided in a few choices, but it is definitely great cinema on many levels. Imaginary is great cinema, and maybe 2 out of 20 levels were decent, but for the most part, it is an atrocious failure. Please don't support that. I'm more enthusiastic for Dune Part 2 than Kung Fu Panda or Imaginary, but I have to say honestly, don't support Imaginary in any form or shape. It just does not deserve any good box office at all. At least Dune Part 2 put an effort in, and so did Kung Fu Panda, but Imaginary, not much of an effort at all, unfortunately.